Day 2, Armor of God, the Breastplate of Righteousness, explained. There's exactly one hit a Roman soldier could never survive. A direct blow to the chest. No skill, no shield positioning, no amount of battlefield experience could undo that kind of wound. So, of every piece of equipment a soldier wore, the breastplate protected the one thing that, if lost, meant everything else was lost with it. Paul picks that exact image for something a lot of Christians secretly think they have to earn all over again every single day. Today, we're breaking down the breastplate of righteousness, and why the thing guarding your heart was never supposed to be your own performance. Having put on the breastplate of righteousness. Ephesians 6:14. Roman breastplates, collectively called the lorica, came in several forms across different eras: segmented metal plates known as lorica segmentata, flexible chainmail called lorica hamata, or, in earlier periods, solid molded bronze fitted directly to the torso. Whatever the style, the purpose never changed. It covered the heart and lungs, the vital organs a soldier could not afford to expose in close combat. A soldier could take a wound to the arm or the leg and keep fighting. A solid hit to the chest ended the fight, and often the soldier's life, almost immediately. There was no fighting on from that wound. Paul places this piece second, right after the belt, and that order isn't incidental. Once truth secures everything in place, the very next priority is guarding the heart. Because in both ancient thought and Paul's own theology, the heart wasn't just a physical organ. It was the center of a person's will, emotion, and identity all at once. If the belt is what holds everything together, the breastplate is what protects the actual core of who you are underneath all of it. Paul's audience in Ephesus knew exactly what a breastplate looked like. Roman soldiers were a constant, visible presence throughout the empire, guarding gates, patrolling streets, standing at attention in public squares. Paul isn't inventing an abstract metaphor here. He's pointing at something his readers walked past every day and saying, "This, right here, is what protects your heart in the fight you're actually in, whether you've noticed it or not." Just like the belt, this image comes straight out of Isaiah, describing God himself preparing for battle on behalf of a broken world. He put on righteousness as a breastplate and a helmet of salvation on his head. Isaiah 59:17. In its original context, this passage comes right after Isaiah laments that there was no one to intervene. The world had become so saturated with injustice that God himself had to step in and do what no human could accomplish. Isaiah pictures God arming himself, personally, because righteousness wasn't available anywhere else. Paul takes that image, armor originally worn by God alone, and extends it to ordinary, imperfect believers. There's an earlier Old Testament connection worth adding here, too, from the priestly garments described in Exodus 28. The high priest wore a jeweled chest piece called the choshin, inscribed with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel, worn directly over the heart whenever he entered the presence of God in the tabernacle. It was called the Breastplate of Judgment, and its entire function was representation, carrying the people symbolically into God's presence, positioned exactly over the heart, precisely because that was the place that mattered most. Paul's readers, especially anyone with a Jewish background, would likely have heard both echoes layered together at once: God's own armor from Isaiah, and the priest's sacred representative garment from Exodus. Here's where this piece gets its real theological weight. For Paul, righteousness is almost never something a person manufactures on their own effort. Look at how directly he states it elsewhere. For our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. 2 Corinthians 5:21. That's the theology underneath this armor. Paul isn't telling believers to armor their hearts with flawless moral behavior or a spotless track record. He's saying that the righteousness protecting your heart is one that was given to you, not one you built brick by brick through your own good days. That distinction changes everything about how this piece actually functions under pressure. A breastplate you have to personally reforge every single morning, based entirely on how well yesterday went, is fragile by design. It cracks the very first time you fail badly. A breastplate that was given to you, that was never dependent on your performance in the first place, holds regardless of how the day actually went. This is where a lot of people quietly struggle, even without ever saying it out loud. Guilt and shame are some of the most effective weapons used against a person's heart. Not always because they're entirely false, but because they convince you that your standing before God rises and falls with your most recent behavior. Miss a day of prayer, snap at someone you love, fall back into an old pattern you thought you'd outgrown. And suddenly, it feels like the armor over your heart has simply vanished, because somewhere along the way, you assumed you were the one responsible for keeping it forged and polished. Picture someone who has a genuinely bad week, impatient with their family, distracted in prayer, caught in an old habit they thought they'd left behind. The temptation isn't just regret over the specific actions. It's a deeper, quieter conclusion. Maybe I was never really covered to begin with. That thought is shame doing exactly what it's designed to do, treating the breastplate as something you lost through failure, instead of something given that failure never actually had the power to revoke. Wearing the breastplate practically means refusing to let your sense of standing before God rise and fall with your performance chart. It means, on the days you fail, deliberately going back to what's actually true rather than what you feel you currently deserve in the moment. It means learning to recognize the difference between conviction, which points you gently back toward God and toward change, and shame, which tries to convince you the armor is gone entirely and there's no point trying. One is a compass, correcting your direction. The other is an attack, aimed straight at your chest. Learning to tell the two apart, especially in the exact moment they show up, is what it looks like to actually keep this piece fastened over the long run. You do not manufacture the armor over your own heart. You receive it. That single shift, from earning to receiving, is the entire difference between a breastplate that cracks under the first real hit and one that was never yours to forge in the first place, and therefore was never yours to lose. Guard your heart, yes, exactly as Scripture instructs. But guard it with what was given to you, not with what you're desperately, exhaustingly trying to prove all over again, every single day. That's the breastplate of righteousness. The piece protecting the one hit you genuinely cannot survive on your own. Next time, we're heading down to the ground. The shoes fitted with the readiness of the gospel of peace, and why what you're standing on matters just as much as what you're wearing over your heart. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and tell me in the comments, where has shame tried to convince you the armor was already gone?